Tudor, founder of Empower Total Health, and today's weekly update topic is how not to die of heart disease, stroke, or diabetes if you're vegan. A US study has shed light on which foods to eat and which to avoid if you don't want to die of heart disease, stroke, or diabetes. And vegans, vegetarians, and plant-based eaters should also take note. The study took data from 4 sources. First was the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or NHANES, which is a government-run periodic survey of dietary habits in the US population. And it takes into account demographic factors such as sex, age, race, and education level. Now, these data were used to quantify what Americans actually eat, and it's pretty scary. The second data set was meta-analyses, or syntheses of data from numerous different studies of what are called prospective cohort studies. What happens there is you recruit a large segment of a particular population and you follow them up over a pretty lengthy time period to see how their dietary habits correlate with what diseases they develop, and also meta-analyses of randomized clinical trials. So that's a study design in which you take people who already have a disease or are at high risk of developing that disease, and you allocate them at random to receive either a particular dietary intervention or just standard care. Go on eating as you always have. These data were used to calculate the impact that 10 foods and nutrients had on risk of death from heart disease, stroke, or type 2 diabetes. And that category was called cardiometabolic mortality. And the data was segmented by age group because obviously people have a higher risk of these diseases as they get older. The 10 foods and nutrients studied were fruits, excluding fruit juices, vegetables, and they lumped legumes like lentils, peas, and beans in that vegetable category, nuts and seeds, whole grains, unprocessed red meat, processed meat, sugar-sweetened beverages, soft drinks or soda, polyunsaturated fat as a replacement for either carbohydrate or saturated fat, and omega-3 fats. The third data set was observational studies documenting associations between various levels of intake of each of these 10 dietary factors and the risk of cardiometabolic mortality. These data were used to estimate what Americans should be eating if they want to have the lowest risk of dying of heart disease, stroke, or diabetes. And the fourth lot of data was from the National Center for Health Statistics, and this was on disease-specific cardiometabolic deaths, segmented by sex, age, race, and education level. These data were used to calculate how many Americans actually did die from heart disease, stroke, and diabetes over the study period. And by combining all these data, the researchers were able to estimate how many Americans died from cardiometabolic causes due to eating too much or too little of each of the foods and nutrients studied. Plant eaters are exempt, of course, from some of the bad news. Eating any processed meat, things like bacon, ham, salami, pastrami, sausages, hot dogs, corned beef, beef jerky, canned meat, and lunch meats, was calculated to have caused over 12% of heart disease deaths and 17.5% of diabetes deaths, while eating more than a measly 14.3 grams per day of red meat caused just over 4% of diabetes death. Now, for reference, the average weight of a steak that's sold as a single adult serving in Australia is 195 grams. It does range up to 552 grams, so eating more than 14 grams a day raises your risk of dying of diabetes. So that's the good news for vegetarians and vegans. Stay away from red and processed meat, you reduce your risk. But many vegetarians and vegans simply aren't eating enough of the protective factors, and they may be consuming just as much as some of the other risky ones as omnivores. For example, eating less than 300 grams of fruit per day, which is around 2 pieces of whole fruit, caused over 22% of strokes, and that includes nearly 32% of hemorrhagic or bleeding strokes, which are much harder to treat than the more common ischemic or clotting stroke. And plant eaters who generally have lower cholesterol levels are actually protected against those clotting strokes, but not against ischemic stroke. Many of my clients are eating next to no fruit when I see them, often due to being scared off fruit because it has too much sugar. Now, I wrote an article called "Does Fruit Make You Fat?" And there's a detailed rebuttal of this ridiculously silly idea in that article, so check that out. Eating less than 400 grams of vegetables per day caused about the same amount of strokes as insufficient fruit, nearly 22%, and almost 25% of hemorrhagic strokes. When I review food journals for my new clients, even vegans, they often contain virtually no vegetables. Eating less than 125 grams per day of whole grains such as brown rice, quinoa, and rolled oats was estimated to cause 17% of diabetes deaths and 10.5% of stroke deaths. Unfortunately, the vegan community is not immune from carbophobia. I've seen many posts on vegan Facebook groups from people who are avoiding grains because they mistakenly believe that grains cause weight gain and gut problems. Drinking any kind of sugar sweetened beverages whatsoever caused nearly 11% of coronary heart disease deaths. Unfortunately, many ethical vegans continue to consume soft drinks because as long as an animal wasn't harmed in making it, it's okay. And finally, consuming more than 2,000 milligrams per day of sodium was estimated to cause over 21% of deaths from hypertensive heart disease, that's high blood pressure. In fact, in the over 65 age group, high salt intake was the single nutritional factor most associated with cardiometabolic mortality. Eating too much salt, premature death. So how much sodium do vegans and vegetarians eat? Generally speaking, way too much. Here's how easy it is to exceed that 2,000 milligrams per day cutoff point using foods that I often see in my clients' food journals or posted with enthusiasm on vegan Facebook groups. Foods like bread and Nuttelex and biocheese and vegan chips and hummus and vegetarian sausages and various other vegan processed foods. So just with 7 foods there, you get over 2,000 milligrams of sodium in a day, and that's not counting all the sodium from other foods that you might be consuming, and these are fairly realistic serving sizes. Now, in contrast, a whole kilogram of frozen mixed vegetables contains only 180 milligrams of sodium. A kilo of fruit, not that you'd probably eat that much, but a kilo of fruit has only 21 milligrams of sodium. A cup of cooked brown rice, 5 milligrams of sodium. A cup of cooked chickpeas, only 12 milligrams. On a diet of whole natural plant foods such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, not roasted and salted nuts and seeds, you will get exactly as much sodium as you need, the amount that humans consume throughout the vast majority of our evolution, which research pegs at around 768 milligrams per day. The bottom line is that avoiding animal products is not enough to protect our health, which I think should be a priority, not just the health of the animals. Most of the ethical vegans that I see in my practice are eating way too much salt from processed foods, processed vegan foods, and not eating enough fruits, vegetables, including legumes, whole grains, and nuts and seeds to give them optimal protection against dying prematurely from heart disease, stroke, or diabetes. Now, if you're confused about what you should be eating or you just don't know how to plan an optimal plant-based diet, my EmpowerEd Health and Nutrition Education program is for you. It's packed with resources on how to implement a healthy 100% plant-based way of eating. And it includes video recordings of my full-day Empowered Eating seminar, my plant-powered oil-free cooking workshop, Healthy Eating 101, which covers kitchen setup, meal planning, and batch cooking, and 2 live webinars per month, including an open Q&A session where you get to pick my brains on any nutrition and health topic that you're interested in, and an in-depth exploration of an important health topic. So far, we've covered things like fasting, we've covered bone health, we've covered cancer screening, we've covered sleep, we've covered exercise. Your first month of membership of EmpowerEd is 100% free. So just follow the registration link at the end of this video or in the notes below and get on board with EmpowerEd to live your best life. Thanks very much for listening. Please do feel free to share this with your friends and on social media. And I look forward to catching up with you for next week's weekly update.